Red Bull seems to not be where they wanted to be and originally projected with the upgrades in the mid-season. And now that the RB20 is not the most dominant force on the grid, both of the championships have come to fruition. Verstappen has shared his dissatisfaction with how his team has been caught up so quickly, and Pierre Wache's views on the car are not as good as Red Bull fans would want them to be, with Horner expecting this competition to continue in the next 18 months, as well as Mercedes and Ferrari being extremely hopeful for the new regulations in 2027. Have we slowly but surely entered into Red Bull's downfall era? And if so, can Verstappen be dethroned from the championship in 2025 and maybe even in 2024? It's safe to say that Red Bull have endured a very difficult stint over the last 8 races, and while Verstappen is the most scoring driver over this span, the difference between him and the second place driver Piastri is just 15 points. What is more worrying for the Austrian team is that McLaren has been edging extremely close in the Constructors' Championship, as they are just 42 points away from the Austrian squad in this regard. And with Perez continuing to drive alongside Verstappen in the last 10 races of 2024, there is a massive risk that Red Bull might lose the Constructors to their fiercest rivals and be threatened from teams like Mercedes and Ferrari. This has a huge implication on 2025 as well, because ever since the issues with the RB20 started, Red Bull have promised upgrades on circuits like Silverstone and Hungary, but had it not been for the strategy in the former one, Verstappen would have likely ended up around P5 and P6, as the RB20 had been arguably the 3rd fastest car on the grid during that race. A similar scenario happened in Budapest, where the 3-time world champion was convinced he would get those 0.2 of a second missing to McLaren, according to Marco, but it turned out that Verstappen was nowhere near the Woking-based squad and even the W15 of Hamilton. This is why Wache has spoken about the car and how there is a growing concern that the upgrades are not working, which is something that was to be expected after Newey's comments before his departure, when the Brit mastermind said that there are certain elements of the car that he doesn't like but wasn't listened to by the team of engineers that Wache is leading. Now, a couple of laps later, and we're seeing the true impact of Newey's departure, and while this might not be directly linked to him, the fact that he is not there to help them navigate the car in the right direction does go to show that we're very unlikely to see a dominant force like the RB19 again on the grid. Elaborating further, Wache said, "We improved compared to last year without a doubt, but we didn't deliver what we expected in some areas, especially in the high-speed corners. We expected a little bit more than we have. Without thinking about the competitiveness of the car, so just based on our own references, we expected a little bit more with our tools." Furthermore, Wache opened up on an issue that doesn't seem like good news for Red Bull, and that is the inability to transfer what they are receiving from the data simulator to the track itself. While Wache is pulling excuses as to how every team on the grid experiences this kind of problem, with Mercedes being the first one with their previous cars to have come out publicly and stated that the correlation between the on-track performance and the simulator is their #1 obstacle to finding more performance, we've seen that this is not the case with the Silver Arrows, as well as now with McLaren. Adding about this situation to a greater extent, Wache continued, "We try to see some tendencies, but it's very difficult to highlight them because last year Perez was struggling as well sometimes, so it's difficult for us to find the reason. The main reason we have is that we try to reproduce the car and all these things in the simulations, but it doesn't mean that it simulates exactly what the car is doing in all conditions. The interaction with the tyres is very difficult to reproduce, even if we try our best. Improving these areas is an important part of our process. The balance with these cars is quite tricky to achieve, because if you create downforce in a specific area of the car that you cannot rebalance mechanically, then it is difficult to use that gain." All of this looks like a Mercedes type of issue that Red Bull is suffering from right now, because in certain situations, Wolff stated that there is around 1 second of performance to be unlocked from the car as they're projecting the downforce in the simulators, but they are unable to unleash it on the track. Or even worse, once they unleash it, the balance of the car becomes the biggest problem for the team to solve. Judging by the statements made from Wache, it seems like Red Bull have entered this period of struggling with the balance of the car, and having Verstappen change his attitude from urging some people in Red Bull to wake up and work on the car to accepting that sometimes there isn't more performance to be found, but they have to work with what they have, is a clear indicator that the Austrian squad will have a lot of competitiveness in the entirety of 2025, as well as the remainder of 2024. Now, it was a bit weird for us that Red Bull got caught so quickly in 2024, because even McLaren was surprised with the amount of pace and performance they found from the Miami and Imola upgrades. But the reality is that last year was truly a unicorn one, and therefore what we're seeing now was meant to happen. The matter that is worrying Red Bull is that it happened a bit too quick, and amid the departures from Newey and Wheatley, the team might find it extremely hard to get back on track as early as 2025. This puts a lot of pressure on Verstappen too, who stated that the decision on where he will continue to race will be based on performance and not emotion, because if it's based on the emotions of what he feels towards Red Bull, it will always backfire on him. Paul Monahan, who is the chief engineer of Red Bull, has detailed how the improved race pace of Red Bull's rivals have more or less caught the team in a position which they didn't believe they would find themselves in, and a position in which they will likely stay for a bit longer because they don't have an immediate fix to their issues. Adding to this, Monahan said, "I do remember seeing some comments to say that we won't be caught in 2024 or 2025. It wasn't quite true, was it? So did it come slightly quicker? I think that is a personal view. Some people may say, oh, this should have taken longer. Personally, I was a little surprised at how quickly they were on us, but equally it's not something we can influence. I can't change the speed of our nearest competitors, we can only change the speed of our car." It does draw a reaction from us, as you may have seen. We are changing the car, and we are prepared to do it as early as we can, as we have to. However, when the sport has found itself in the third year of the current regulations, it's obvious that the grid will start to converge as other teams have started to learn more and more from Red Bull, and combined with the toxic environment and the internal power shift that has been ravaging the Austrian team, it's the perfect scenario for another team to take over the reign. It's not as easy as it seems, and while 2025 is slowly but surely shaping up to be quite a competitive season, given how the grid is currently shaped up, we've seen with teams like Ferrari that just because you're bringing upgrades, it doesn't mean they are working. The SF24 was much faster before the revolutionary upgrades were brought in Barcelona, as they are now looking to fix the issue as early as possible and therefore be part of the top 3 teams in the last 10 races, joining McLaren, Mercedes and Red Bull. On the other hand, Red Bull refuses to be related to Mercedes' diva back in 2018, when Wolff stated that their car was in a very bad state, even though they went on to win both of the championships with it. Addressing these comments and relating it with the comparison of the W09, Monahan said, "No, I wouldn't describe our car like a diva. Some of the driver comments, good, bad bits they like or don't like, have been with our car at most races, if not all, and as such, it is not an unpredictable one when it comes to circuits. We know what we might get, and as such, we have things in our preparation to try and alleviate those and extract more from it." So no, I don't know what characteristics Mercedes are describing. If they said their car was a diva, I don't think ours is. With all this in mind, the situation in Red Bull is all but good, and the question remains whether 2024 can provide some interesting battles in the Drivers' Championship as well, with 78 points dividing Verstappen and Norris, as the Constructors' Championship is now more or less secured. What do you think about the chances of Red Bull being dethroned in 2024 and the challenge they will endure in 2025 in keeping everything together? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.